The relentless Arizona sun beat down on Sophia Blackett as she stood at the mercantile counter, fingers trembling as she counted out the meager pile of coins for the third time. Outside the windows of Wickenburg's general store, dust devils swirled across the main street, a fitting accompaniment to the storm of worry brewing inside her. "I'm sorry, Miss Blackett," Mr. Peterson said, his weathered face creased with genuine concern. "The medicine for your father costs $1.60. You're still 40 cents short." Sophia bit her lip, fighting back tears. Her father's pneumonia had worsened overnight, and the doctor said this tonic was his best chance. She'd already sold her mother's silver hairbrush that morning, the last valuable thing they owned. "Please, Mr. Peterson, my father won't last another day without it." Her voice cracked, betraying the exhaustion of 3 sleepless nights at her father's bedside. The shopkeeper shook his head regretfully. "I'd help if I could, Miss Blackett, but I've extended credit to half the town already. Times are hard for everyone since the mine cutbacks." The bell above the door jingled, and Sophia didn't bother to look up, too focused on the insufficient pile of pennies and nickels that represented her father's slim chance at survival. "Afternoon, Peterson. Hot enough to fry eggs on the boardwalk today." The deep voice carried the hint of a Texas drawl. "Sure is, Mr. Yates," Peterson replied. "What can I do for you?" Sophia remained still, unwilling to move aside until she figured out a solution. There had to be something else she could sell, someone else she could ask. "Miss, are you all right?" The stranger's voice was closer now, and she finally glanced up. He stood tall beside her, his broad shoulders blocking the afternoon sun that streamed through the windows. Dark hair curled beneath a wide-brimmed hat, and his eyes, a striking shade of green, regarded her with unexpected kindness. His clothes were trail-worn but of good quality, marking him as neither a drifter nor a wealthy rancher, but somewhere in between. "I'm fine," she whispered, quickly wiping away a tear with the back of her hand. "Just short on funds is all." The man's gaze moved from her face to the medicine bottle on the counter, then to her pathetic pile of coins. Without a word, he reached into his pocket and added several coins to her stack. "That should cover it," he said simply. Sophia stared at the money in disbelief. "Sir, I can't accept." "You can and you will," he interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. "Looks like you need it more than I do right now." Mr. Peterson counted the coins and nodded, wrapping the medicine bottle in paper. "That's exact change, Miss Blackett." The stranger tipped his hat. "Name's Thomas Yates, new in town." "Sophia Blackett," she replied, clutching the package like it was made of gold. "And I don't know how to thank you, Mr. Yates. This medicine, it's for my father. He's very ill." "No need for thanks," Thomas said. "Hope your pa feels better soon." He turned to Peterson. "Now about that sack of coffee and some sugar." Sophia hurried toward the door, eager to get the medicine to her father, but paused with her hand on the knob. "Mr. Yates," she called back, "I'll repay you. Every cent." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I'll hold you to that, Miss Blackett." She nodded, grateful yet determined, then stepped out into the blistering heat of Wickenburg, Arizona in the summer of 1883. Sophia rushed through town, dodging wagons and horsemen on the dusty Main Street. The small bottle of medicine felt impossibly precious in her hand. Their modest home sat on the edge of town, once a source of pride for her father, now falling into disrepair since his illness had made him unable to work. She burst through the door, startling Mrs. Winters, the neighbor who had kindly agreed to sit with her father while Sophia went to town. "Did you get it?" the older woman asked, rising from her chair beside the sick. "Yes," Sophia said breathlessly, unwrapping the package. "How is he?" Mrs. Winters' expression was grave. "No change." The fever's still high. You'd best give him that medicine straight away." Sophia approached the bed where her father lay, his breathing labored and face flushed with fever. Once a robust man who'd worked hard as a carpenter, Samuel Blackett had been reduced to a shadow of himself in just 2 weeks' time. "Papa," she called softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I've brought the medicine Dr. Wilson prescribed." Her father's eyes fluttered open, glazed with fever. "Sophie, my girl. Here, drink this." She carefully lifted his head and held the bottle to his lips. "It's going to make you better." He swallowed obediently, then fell back against the pillows, exhausted by even this small effort. Sophia wiped his brow with a damp cloth, praying the medicine would work quickly. "A stranger helped me pay for it," she told him, though she wasn't sure he could hear her. "A Mr. Yates. Just arrived in town, it seems." Mrs. Winters gathered her shawl. "New folks don't often come to Wickenburg these days, not since the mining slowed. Was he a miner?" Sophia shook her head. "I don't think so. Seemed more like a rancher or maybe a horseman. I didn't get the chance to ask." "Well, whoever he is, the Lord bless him for helping." Mrs. Winters moved toward the door. "I'll come back this evening to check on you both. Try to get some rest yourself, child. You're dead on your feet." After Mrs. Winters left, Sophia tended to her father, spooning broth into his mouth when he was conscious enough to swallow. The afternoon waned into evening, and she must have dozed off in the chair because she woke with a start to a knock at the door. Disoriented, she checked on her father first. His breathing seemed less labored, his face not quite as flushed before answering the door. Thomas Yates stood on her porch, hat in hand, the setting sun casting long shadows behind him. "Mr. Yates," she said, surprised. "Miss Blackett." He nodded politely. "I hope I'm not intruding. I asked around town about where I might find you. Wanted to see if your father was improving." Touched by his concern, Sophia stepped back. "Please come in. It's kind of you to check." Thomas ducked his head as he entered the modest home, his tall frame making the small front room seem even smaller. His eyes took in the simple furnishings, the stack of carpentry tools gathering dust in the corner, the Bible on the side table. "He seems a little better," Sophia said, leading him to her father's bedside. "The medicine appears to be helping, though it's too soon to tell for certain." Thomas studied the sick man with concern. "Pneumonia." "Yes, how did you know? My younger brother had it 2 winters back. Same pallor, same breathing." His expression darkened momentarily. "We were lucky, got him to a doctor in time." Something in his tone suggested not everyone in his family had been so fortunate, but Sophia didn't pry. "I brought some supplies," Thomas said, setting a package on the table. "Just some basic provisions, bread, cheese, coffee. Figured you might not have had time for shopping with your father ill." Sophia felt her cheeks warm with equal parts gratitude and embarrassment. Their cupboards were indeed nearly bare, but accepting more charity from this stranger felt wrong. "Mr. Yates, while I appreciate your generosity, I can't keep accepting handouts. As I said earlier, I intend to repay you for the medicine." He met her gaze steadily. "And as I recall, I said I'd hold you to that. This isn't a handout, Miss Blackett. Consider it an advance on whatever work you might do to repay me." "Work?" she echoed. "What sort of work?" Thomas ran a hand through his dark hair, looking slightly uncomfortable for the first time. "Well, that's just it. I've purchased the old Harrington Ranch about 5 miles outside town. Place has been empty for nearly a year, and it's in dire need of attention. I could use someone with good sense to help get it in order." Sophia blinked in surprise. "You bought the Harrington place, but it's enormous, nearly 1,000 acres," he shrugged. "The price was right. Previous owner was eager to sell after his wife died. I've been looking for the right property for some time now." "And you want me to? What exactly?" Help with the house primarily. It needs a woman's touch. Cleaning, organizing, making it livable again. I can handle the barn and the land, but I'm at a loss when it comes to domestic matters. Sophia considered his offer. She desperately needed the money, and once her father recovered, she'd need to find work anyway. Their savings had been depleted by his illness. I have to care for my father, she said. I couldn't leave him all day. Of course not, Thomas agreed quickly. Not until he's well. But perhaps a few hours here and there when your neighbor lady can sit with him. And once he's recovered, we can discuss more regular arrangements. A groan from the bed interrupted their conversation. Samuel Blackett was awake, his eyes clearer than they'd been in days. "Papa," Sophia hurried to his side. "Water," he rasped. She quickly poured a cup from the pitcher and helped him drink. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been trampled by a herd of cattle," he muttered, but there was a hint of his old humor in his voice. His gaze shifted to Thomas, who stood respectfully at the foot of the bed. "Who's this?" "Thomas Yates, sir," Thomas introduced himself. "Just moved to the area." Samuel studied him through narrowed eyes. "You the one who helped my daughter with the medicine cost?" Thomas nodded. "It was nothing, sir." "It wasn't nothing to us," Samuel said firmly. "I thank you. Not many would help strangers these days." "Papa, Mr. Yates has bought the Harrington Ranch," Sophia explained. "He's offered me work helping to set the house in order." Samuel's expression grew wary. "Is that so?" Thomas sensed the father's concern. "The work would be entirely proper, Mr. Blackett. I've also hired 2 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse, and Mrs. Garcia from town comes out 3 times a week to cook. Your daughter would never be without appropriate company." Samuel seemed to relax slightly. "Well, that's something at least." He looked at Sophia. "What do you think, girl?" "I think it's a good opportunity," she answered carefully. "Once you're well enough, of course." Samuel nodded wearily, his brief surge of energy already fading. "You've always had good judgment, Sophie." His eyes drifted closed again. Sophia adjusted his blankets, then gestured for Thomas to follow her back to the main room. "It seems we have an arrangement, Mr. Yates," she said quietly. "But I want to be clear, I'll work to repay what I owe you, and I'll accept fair wages for fair work, nothing more." Thomas's lips quirked in what might have been amusement. "You drive a hard bargain, Miss Blackett, but I agree to your terms." He extended his hand. Sophia hesitated only briefly before shaking it, noting the calluses that spoke of a man familiar with hard work despite his evident means. "I should go," Thomas said, picking up his hat. "I've imposed on your evening long enough. Will you let me know how your father fares?" "I will," she promised, walking him to the door. "And thank you again, Mr. Yates. Not everyone would have been so kind." "Thomas," he said, "if we're to be working together, you might as well use my given name." Sophia nodded. "And I'm Sophia." He smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed his serious face and made those green eyes crinkle at the corners. "Good night, Sophia. I hope your father continues to improve." As she watched him walk away, disappearing into the gathering darkness, Sophia wondered what twist of fate had brought Thomas Yates to Wickenburg, and into their lives at precisely the moment they needed him most. Over the next week, Samuel Blackett's condition improved steadily. The medicine, combined with Sophia's diligent care, gradually restored his strength. By the 10th day, he was able to sit up in bed for short periods and even eat solid food again. Dr. Wilson, making his weekly visit, pronounced himself cautiously optimistic. "He's turning the corner, Miss Blackett. His lungs are clearing and the fever's gone. Still, he needs rest, no work for at least another month." "A month?" Samuel protested from his bed. "Doc, I've got commissions waiting. The Millers need their cabinets finished and Judge Parker's desk will have to wait, Doctor." Wilson interrupted firmly. Unless you'd prefer to have a relapse and end up 6 feet under, then those cabinets will never be finished. Samuel subsided with a grumble, but Sophia saw the worry in his eyes. A month without income would strain their already precarious finances to the breaking point. "Thank you, doctor," Sophia said, walking him to the door. "About your fee." The doctor waved a hand. "It's been taken care of," Sophia frowned. "Taken care of? By whom?" "Mr. Yates settled your account yesterday, said to put it on his tab at the ranch." "Doctor." Wilson smiled at her stunned expression. "He seems like a good man, that Yates. Wickenburg could use more like him." After the doctor left, Sophia returned to her father's bedside, her thoughts in turmoil. Thomas had visited twice more since that first evening, each time bringing small gifts, fresh eggs from his new chickens, a jar of honey, a book of poetry he thought she might enjoy. And now this. "What's troubling you, Sophie?" her father asked, noting her expression. She told him about Thomas paying the doctor's fee, unable to keep the frustration from her voice. "It's too much, Papa. I already owe him for the medicine, and now this. How will I ever repay him?" Samuel studied his daughter thoughtfully. "Perhaps repayment isn't what he's after." "What do you mean?" "I may be old and sick, but I'm not blind," he said with a ghost of a smile. "The man is sweet on you, child." Sophia felt her cheeks heat. "Don't be ridiculous. He's just being kind. Men like Thomas Yates don't go out of their way to be just kind without reason. He could have helped anyone in town with money troubles, yet he chose to help you." Sophia busied herself straightening the bed covers. "Well, regardless of his motives, I intend to repay every cent. In fact, I think it's time I started that work he offered. Mrs. Winters said she'd be happy to stay with you during the days." Samuel nodded. "Go on, then. I'm well enough now that you needn't hover. And Sophie," he added as she turned to leave, "be careful with your heart. I've nothing against Yates, seems a decent sort, but we know precious little about him." "I'm only going to work, Papa," she protested. "My heart isn't involved." His knowing look made her turn away quickly to hide her expression, because the truth was, she'd thought about Thomas Yates far more than was proper over the past days. His kindness, his quiet strength, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. The following morning, Sophia rose early, packing a small lunch and donning her best day dress, a modest blue cotton that had faded from too many washings but was still presentable. She arranged her chestnut hair in a simple knot at the nape of her neck and pinned her straw hat firmly in place. "I'll be back before sundown," she promised her father, who was propped up in bed with the book Thomas had brought. "Mrs. Winters will be here any moment, and she's brought stew for your lunch. Go on, girl," Samuel shooed her with a wave. "I'm not an invalid anymore." Sophia kissed his forehead and stepped out into the early morning light. The walk to the livery stable where Thomas had arranged for her to borrow a horse was pleasant in the relative cool of dawn. By midday, the Arizona sun would be merciless, but for now, the air held the sweetness of morning. The liveryman had a gentle mare saddled and waiting for her. "Compliments of Mr. Yates," he said with a wink. "Said to tell you she's yours to use whenever you need for the trip to and from the ranch." Sophia's pride prickled again at this additional generosity, but she thanked the man and mounted the horse, grateful at least that she wouldn't have to walk the 5 miles in the heat. The ride to the Harrington ranch took less than an hour. As she crested the final hill, Sophia caught her breath at the vista before her. The ranch house sat nestled in a small valley, a 2-story structure of weathered wood and stone with a wide, wraparound porch. Behind it stretched pastures bordered by split-rail fences, and beyond those, the rugged beauty of the Arizona landscape unfolded in layers of red earth and distant mountains. 2 men were working on the corral near the large barn, and as Sophia approached, One of them, recognizably Thomas even from a distance, looked up and raised a hand in greeting. He said something to his companion, then strode toward her as she guided the mare into the yard. "You came," he said, reaching up to help her dismount. His hands were strong and sure at her waist, and she was acutely aware of them even through the fabric of her dress. "I said I would," she replied, stepping back once her feet were firmly on the ground. "And I have a new debt to settle with you now. Dr. Wilson told me you paid his fee." Thomas had the grace to look slightly abashed. "I didn't mean for him to tell you that." "Why not? Did you think I wouldn't want to know what I owe?" "It's not about owing, Sophia." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign of frustration. "I was in a position to help, so I did. That's all. And I appreciate it," she said more gently, seeing the genuine discomfort in his expression. "But I need to make my own way, Thomas. Surely you can understand that." He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "I do, and I respect it. Come on, let me show you the house and what needs doing. I think you'll see there's more than enough work to cover any debts you think you have." The house was even larger than it appeared from the outside, with 6 bedrooms upstairs and spacious living areas below. It had been well built, but was now layered in dust, with cobwebs festooning the corners and mouse droppings evident in the pantry. "The previous owner left most of the furniture," Thomas explained as they walked through the rooms. "But it all needs cleaning, and there are linens to be washed, curtains to be mended. Honestly, I'm not even sure where to start." Sophia surveyed the space with a practical eye. "The kitchen first, I think, then the main living areas. The bedrooms can wait unless you're planning to have guests soon." "No guests," Thomas said. "Just me for now, and I've been camping in that front bedroom." He pointed to a door off the main hallway. "The ranch hands stay in the bunkhouse out back." "What about your family?" Sophia asked, curiosity getting the better of her. "Will they be joining you?" A shadow crossed Thomas's face. "My parents passed some years ago. My brother's still in Texas, running the family ranch there." "I'm sorry about your parents," Sophia said softly. "It's just been my father and me since my mother died when I was 12. Thomas nodded, a moment of understanding passing between them. "Well," he said, changing the subject, "I'll leave you to it. There's a pump in the kitchen for water, and Mrs. Garcia laid in cleaning supplies last week. I'll be working on the north corral if you need anything." Left alone, Sophia rolled up her sleeves and got to work. The kitchen was indeed a disaster, but by midday she had the stove scrubbed, the sink scoured, and was making progress on the cupboards. She paused to eat the lunch she'd packed, sitting on the back porch steps to catch the slight breeze. From this vantage point, she could see Thomas and his men working with the horses in the corral. Even at a distance, Thomas stood out his confident movements, the easy way he handled the nervous bay stallion that shied away from the other men. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, shading his eyes against the sun. Seeing her, he said something to the others and walked toward the house. "Making progress?" he asked, taking off his hat and wiping sweat from his brow with a bandana. "Good progress," she confirmed. "The kitchen will be usable by the end of today. Tomorrow I can start on the dining room and parlor." He nodded, taking a seat beside her on the steps, though careful to maintain a respectable distance. "You must be thirsty. There's a well out back with the coldest water in the county." "I found it," she smiled. "It's wonderful." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching a red-tailed hawk circle lazily in the sky above. "May I ask you something?" Sophia ventured at last. "Anything." "Why Wickenburg? It's not exactly a booming town these days." "The mines are slowing down and people are starting to leave, not arrive." Thomas considered her question. "I wanted a fresh start," he said finally. Somewhere beautiful but not too crowded. When I heard about the Harrington place, it seemed perfect. Good water, decent grazing land, and he smiled, a little self-consciously. And it reminded me of a place my mother used to talk about. She grew up near here before moving to Texas when she married my father. She always said the Arizona sky was the closest thing to heaven on earth. Sophia looked up at the vast expanse of blue above them. She wasn't wrong about that. No, Thomas agreed softly. She wasn't. The moment stretched between them, strangely intimate despite the mundane setting. Then Thomas cleared his throat and stood. I should get back to work. That stallion's still giving us fits. He hesitated, then added, will you stay for supper? Mrs. Garcia left a pot of stew that I'm meant to heat up, but I'd welcome the company. Sophia hesitated. I should get back to my father before dark. Of course. He didn't hide his disappointment well. Another time, perhaps. Perhaps, she agreed, suddenly reluctant to disappoint him further. But thank you for the invitation. He nodded and turned to go, then paused. Sophia, I'm glad you came today. The simple sincerity in his voice made her heart do a strange little flip. So am I, she admitted. As he walked back to the corral, Sophia found herself watching him longer than was proper, admiring the broad set of his shoulders and the confident stride. Her father's words came back to her. Be careful with your heart. Too late, she thought. Her heart was already engaged in ways she hadn't anticipated when she'd agreed to this arrangement. Over the next 2 weeks, Sophia fell into a routine. 3 days a week, she would ride out to the Harrington Ranch or the Yates Ranch, as it was now becoming known, and spend the day cleaning, organizing, and bringing order to the house. Mrs. Winters was happy to sit with Samuel, who was recovering steadily and beginning to chafe at his confinement. The house was gradually transforming under Sophia's care. The kitchen gleamed, the parlor was free of dust and cobwebs, and she'd managed to wash and mend all the downstairs curtains. The large dining table had been polished to a mirror shine, and fresh wildflowers now brightened the center of it. Thomas seemed genuinely appreciative of her efforts, often commenting on how much more pleasant it was to come in from a day's work to a clean, orderly house. Sometimes he would join her for lunch on the porch, and these moments, sharing simple food and conversation while the ranch life continued around them, became the highlights of Sophia's days. They talked about everything and nothing: books they'd read, places they'd seen, childhood memories. Thomas spoke of growing up on a ranch in Texas, of learning to break horses from his father, of his mother's garden that had been the envy of the county. Sophia told him about her mother's skill with a needle, about her father's craftsmanship with wood, about the little schoolhouse where she'd learned to read and write. What they didn't discuss was the growing attraction between them, though Sophia felt it like a current running beneath their conversations, in the way his eyes lingered on her face when she was speaking, in how she found reasons to be in the same room as him, in the accidental brushes of hands that sent warmth coursing through her. On a particularly hot Friday afternoon in late August, Sophia was struggling to reach the top of the parlor bookcase with her dust cloth when she heard Thomas enter the house. "Need some help?" he asked, amusement coloring his voice as he watched her stretching on tiptoe. "If you wouldn't mind," she admitted. "Even with the chair, I can't quite reach." He moved behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, and easily took the cloth from her hand to wipe the highest shelf. The scent of him, sunshine, leather, and something uniquely Thomas, enveloped her, making her dizzy in a way that had nothing to do with the summer heat. "There," he said, handing back the cloth. "All done." She turned to thank him, not realizing how close he still stood. They were suddenly face to face, mere inches separating them. His eyes darkened as they held hers, and for a heart-stopping moment, Sophia thought he might kiss her. The sound of boots on the porch broke the spell. Thomas stepped back quickly as one of the ranch hands, Miguel, appeared in the doorway. "Boss, that stallion's loose again. Broke through the north fence." Thomas sighed. "I'll be right there." As Miguel retreated, he gave Sophia an apologetic look. "Duty calls." "Of course," she said, trying to sound normal despite her racing heart. "Go on." He hesitated, as if wanting to say more, then nodded and followed Miguel out. Sophia pressed her hands to her flushed cheeks. What was happening to her? She'd come here to work off a debt, not to lose her heart to a man she barely knew. Yet with each passing day, Thomas Yates was becoming less of a stranger and more of what? A friend. Something more. That evening, as Sophia prepared to leave, Thomas insisted on riding with her back to town. "The stallion's still out there somewhere," he explained. "I'd feel better knowing you got home safely." The ride back was mostly silent, both of them seemingly lost in thought as the setting sun painted the landscape in golds and crimsons. As they approached the edge of Wickenburg, Thomas finally spoke. "Sophia, I was wondering if you and your father might join me for Sunday dinner at the ranch. Mrs. Garcia will be cooking, and I thought, well, it might be nice for your father to get out a bit now that he's recovering." The invitation surprised her. "That's very kind of you. I'll have to ask Papa if he feels up to the journey. Of course. Just let me know." He paused, then added more hesitantly, "I've enjoyed having you at the ranch these past weeks. It's starting to feel like a home now, thanks to you." The simple sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. "I've enjoyed it too," she admitted. "More than I expected to." They reached her house, and Thomas dismounted to help her down. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, and when she looked up into his face, she saw the same intensity she'd noticed earlier in the parlor. "Sophia," he began, his voice lower than usual. The front door opened, and Samuel Blackett appeared, looking remarkably improved from even a few days before. "There you are, girl," was beginning to worry. His sharp eyes took in Thomas's proximity to his daughter, but he merely nodded a greeting. "Evening, Yates." "Mr. Blackett," Thomas stepped back from Sophia, tipping his hat. "Good to see you up and about. You're looking much better. Feeling it too, thanks to that medicine and my daughter's care." Samuel studied the younger man thoughtfully. "Would you care to come in for coffee?" Sophia glanced at her father in surprise. It was the first time he'd extended such an invitation to Thomas. "I'd be honored, sir," Thomas replied, "but I should get back to the ranch. One of my horses is loose, and I need to help the men find him before full dark." He turned to Sophia. "Thank you for your work today. I'll see you Monday," she nodded. "Monday." With a final nod to them both, Thomas mounted his horse and rode away, his figure gradually disappearing into the gathering dusk. Samuel put an arm around his daughter's shoulders as they watched him go. "He seems like a decent man," he said cautiously. "He is, Papa." Samuel peered down at her. "And that's all you have to say about it?" Sophia felt her cheeks warm. "What else should I say? Perhaps that you're sweet on him. It's written all over your face, child." She ducked her head, embarrassed at being so transparent. "It doesn't matter. He's my employer, nothing more," was all Samuel said as he guided her inside. "By the way, Mrs. Winters brought over a pie. Apple, your favorite." Sophia welcomed the change of subject and busied herself with setting out plates for pie, trying to push thoughts of Thomas Yates from her mind. But later, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his face kept appearing in her thoughts, those green eyes, the way they crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the gentleness in his voice when he said her name. Sunday dawned clear and pleasant, with a hint of autumn in the air despite the lingering summer heat. Sophia had conveyed Thomas's invitation to her father, who had surprised her by accepting readily. Be nice to see something besides these four walls, he'd said. And I'm curious about this ranch he's purchased. They borrowed the neighbor's buggy, and Sophia drove carefully, mindful of her father's still recovering health. Samuel sat beside her, looking better than he had in weeks, with color in his cheeks and a spark back in his eyes. "You've done a fine job nursing me back to health," he told her as they made their way along the dusty road. "But I worry about you, Sophie. You've had no life of your own these past months." "Taking care of you is hardly a burden, Papa," she protested. "Nevertheless, you're young. You should be thinking about your future, a husband, children of your own." Sophia kept her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "There's time enough for that," Samuel snorted. "Time has a way of slipping past when you're not looking. Your mother and I thought we had all the time in the world, and then—" He trailed off, the old grief momentarily darkening his face. "I know, Papa," Sophia said softly, reaching over to squeeze his hand. "But I'm happy with my life as it is." They lapsed into silence then, each lost in their own thoughts until the Yates ranch appeared on the horizon. Thomas must have been watching for them because he emerged from the barn as they drove into the yard. He'd clearly made an effort with his appearance, wearing clean trousers and a pressed shirt, his dark hair neatly combed. "Welcome," he called, coming to help Samuel down from the buggy. "I'm glad you could make it, Mr. Blackett. Call me Samuel," Sophia's father said, gripping Thomas's extended hand firmly. "And thank you for the invitation. It's good to get out after being cooped up for so long." "You're looking well," Thomas observed, then turned to help Sophia down. Their eyes met as his hand circled her waist, and the now familiar warmth spread through her at his touch. "You look lovely," he said quietly, for her ears alone. She smoothed her best dress, a yellow cotton that brought out the amber flecks in her brown eyes, suddenly glad she'd taken extra care with her appearance. "Thank you," she murmured. Samuel cleared his throat, reminding them of his presence, and Thomas quickly stepped back. "Let me show you around," he offered, gesturing toward the main house. "Mrs. Garcia has outdone herself with dinner preparations." The tour was primarily for Samuel's benefit, as Sophia was already familiar with most of the property. She watched with pleasure as her father admired Thomas's efforts at restoration, offering professional opinions on the woodwork and suggesting improvements to the barn's design. Mrs. Garcia, a plump, cheerful woman in her 50s, had indeed prepared a feast: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, fresh corn, and biscuits that melted in the mouth. For dessert, there was peach cobbler with cream. "This is the finest meal I've had in ages," Samuel declared, patting his stomach as they finished. "My compliments to the cook." Mrs. Garcia beamed at him. "Gracias, señor. It is good to cook for appreciative guests." "Usually it is just Mr. Yates and the ranch hands, who eat so fast they barely taste the food," Thomas laughed. "That's not true, Mrs. Garcia. We savor every bite of your cooking." "Pa," she waved a dismissive hand, but her smile remained as she began clearing the plates. "Let me help," Sophia offered, rising from her chair. "No, no," Mrs. Garcia protested. "You are a guest today, not a worker. You and your papa go enjoy the porch while it is still cool. I will bring coffee." Thomas led them out to the wide front porch, where comfortable chairs had been arranged to catch the afternoon breeze. From this vantage point, they could see across the valley to the distant mountains, their peaks hazed purple against the sky. "You've got yourself a fine piece of land here," Samuel remarked, settling into one of the chairs with a contented sigh. "Good water, good grazing, smart investment." "I hope so," Thomas replied. "I've got plans to expand the herd next spring. Maybe try breeding some sturdier stock that can handle the Arizona summers better." As the men discussed ranching, Sophia let her gaze wander over the property, seeing it with new eyes. Under Thomas's care, the neglected ranch was coming back to life. New fencing gleamed white in the sunlight. The barn had been repaired, and she could see the beginnings of a vegetable garden beside the house, her suggestion, which Thomas had enthusiastically adopted. There was a rightness to it all that tugged at something deep inside her. This was a place where a person could put down roots, build a life. A home. Mrs. Garcia brought coffee, then excused herself to return to her own house in town, leaving the three of them to enjoy the peaceful afternoon. The conversation flowed easily, touching on town gossip, Samuel's carpentry business, and Thomas's plans for the ranch. "I've been meaning to ask," Samuel said during a lull, "what brought you to ranching, Thomas?" "Most men who can afford a spread like this are either born to it or made their fortune elsewhere first." Sophia tensed slightly, aware that her father was probing for information about Thomas's background, something she'd been too polite to question directly. Thomas didn't seem offended. "A bit of both, I suppose. My family's been in ranching for generations in Texas. When my father died 5 years ago, my brother and I inherited the family property. He was always better suited to run it, so when he offered to buy me out, I agreed. Took my share and decided to build something of my own." "And you chose Arizona," Samuel pressed. Thomas's eyes briefly met Sophia's. "As I told your daughter, my mother was from these parts. She always spoke of it with such longing that I guess it got into my blood too, even though I'd never seen it until recently." He paused, then added, "The moment I rode into this valley, I knew this was where I wanted to be." The simple sincerity in his voice made Sophia's heart quicken. She'd felt it too. That first day she'd crested the hill and seen the ranch spread out before her, a sense of rightness, of belonging. The afternoon passed pleasantly, and it was only when the sun began to dip toward the horizon that Samuel suggested they should head back to town. "I've imposed on your hospitality long enough," he said, rising with only a slight stiffness to indicate his recent illness. "It's been a pleasure," Thomas insisted, helping Samuel down the porch steps toward the waiting buggy. "I hope you'll come again." "Count on it," Samuel replied with a warmth that surprised Sophia. "Though next time perhaps we can host you in town." "I'd like that," Thomas said, assisting Sophia into the driver's seat. Before he stepped back, he pressed something into her hand, a small envelope. "Your wages," he murmured. "For the past 2 weeks." Sophia tried to hand it back. "Thomas, no. I'm working to repay the debt, which has been more than settled by your efforts," he interrupted firmly. "The work you've done is worth far more than the cost of that medicine and the doctor's fee. Please, Sophia. Accept what you've earned." She hesitated, then nodded, tucking the envelope into her pocket. "Thank you," he smiled, clearly relieved. "See you tomorrow." "Tomorrow," she confirmed. As they drove away, Samuel glanced at his daughter knowingly. "He's smitten with you, girl." Sophia kept her eyes on the reins. "Don't be ridiculous, Papa." "I'm old, not blind," Samuel retorted. "The man can barely keep his eyes off you, and unless I'm mistaken, you feel something for him too." She didn't deny it this time. "Even if that's true, what good would it do? He's a successful rancher and I'm... Well, look at us, Papa. Our circumstances are hardly promising." "Circumstances change," Samuel said mildly. "Mine are improving daily thanks to both of you, and as for Thomas Yates, he strikes me as a man who knows his own mind and isn't much concerned with what others might think." Sophia mulled over her father's words as they traveled back to town, the setting sun warming their backs. Could her father be right? Did Thomas see her as more than just a temporary housekeeper? And if he did, what then? The following week brought changes to Wickenburg. A new vein of silver was discovered in one of the mines that had been on the verge of closing, sparking renewed interest in the town. The stagecoach arrived packed with prospectors and businessmen eager to capitalize on the discovery. Sophia noticed the increased activity as she rode to the ranch on Monday morning. The saloon was doing brisk business despite the early hour, and new tents had sprung up on the outskirts of town, where the flood of newcomers couldn't find proper lodging. When she arrived at the ranch, Thomas was in the barn, deep in conversation with a man she didn't recognize, expensively dressed, with the soft hands of someone unaccustomed to physical labor. Thomas looked up as she approached, his face lighting with a smile that made her heart skip. "Sophia." "Good morning. This is Mr. Hollister from San Francisco. He's in town about the new silver strike." The man turned, eyeing Sophia with open appreciation. "Miss Blackett, a pleasure. Thomas was just showing me his fine stable." "Mr. Hollister is interested in purchasing some of my land for a mining investment," Thomas explained, though Sophia detected a note of reservation in his voice. "The southern section would be perfect for our purposes," Hollister continued smoothly. "Preliminary surveys suggest the vein might extend in that direction. We'd pay handsomely, of course." Sophia knew that section well. It contained the most reliable water source on the property, crucial for the cattle during the dry months. "I've explained that I'm not interested in selling," Thomas said firmly. "This is a working ranch, not a mining operation." Hollister shrugged, though his smile tightened. "Well, think it over. Our offer stands for a week. After that—" "Well, silver fever has a way of changing landscapes one way or another." With a tip of his hat to Sophia, he strode out of the barn. Thomas watched him go, a troubled expression on his face. "You're worried," Sophia observed. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Men like Hollister don't take no for an answer easily. And he's right about one thing: silver changes things. I've seen it before. Towns boom, prices soar, and suddenly ranching land isn't worth a fraction of what mining claims are." "But you won't sell," Thomas's expression hardened. "No. I didn't come all this way to build something temporary. Silver strikes play out, but good land with good water, that's something worth holding on to." His conviction stirred something inside her: admiration, yes, but something deeper too. A shared value, a recognition of what truly mattered. "Enough about Hollister," Thomas said, visibly shaking off his concern. "How was your Sunday evening? Did your father tire himself out too much with the visit?" "Not at all. In fact, he was in better spirits than I've seen in weeks. He talked about your ranch half the night, offering suggestions for improvements." She laughed. "I think he's itching to get back to work himself." "He's welcome to advise me anytime," Thomas said sincerely. "I could use his expertise on several projects around here." As they walked toward the house, Thomas seemed unusually thoughtful. Finally, he stopped on the porch steps, turning to face her. "Sophia, there's something I've been meaning to ask you." Her heart began to race at the seriousness in his tone. "Yes." "The harvest dance is coming up in town next weekend. I was wondering if you might. That is, if you'd do me the honor of attending with me." The harvest dance was Wickenburg's biggest social event of the year, where couples courted openly and engagements were often announced. An invitation wasn't merely for an evening's entertainment. It was a public declaration of interest. As your companion?" she asked, wanting to be certain of his meaning. Thomas's green eyes held her steadily. "As my lady, yes, if you'd be willing." Sophia felt a rush of mingled joy and trepidation. What would people say? "You're a landowner, and I'm a remarkable woman I'm proud to be seen with," he finished firmly. "Sophia, I don't give a damn what anyone in town thinks. I care what you think, what you feel." She searched his face, finding nothing but honest emotion there. "Then yes," she said softly. "I'd be honored to attend the dance with you." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "You've made me very happy," he said, taking her hand and bringing it briefly to his lips in a gesture that sent warmth spreading up her arm and through her entire body. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Miguel, who needed Thomas's help with a fence repair. With obvious reluctance, Thomas excused himself, leaving Sophia to her housekeeping duties with a promise to see her before she left for town. As she worked, Sophia found herself humming, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Thomas Yates wanted to court her openly. Whatever happened next, that knowledge was enough to make the day shine with possibility. News of the Harvest Dance invitation spread quickly through Wickenburg's gossip network. By Wednesday, when Sophia went to the general store for supplies, she noticed the speculative glances and hushed conversations that paused when she approached. "Here you've caught the eye of that new rancher," Mr. Peterson remarked as he totaled her purchases. "Fine man by all accounts." "Yes, he is," Sophia replied simply, unwilling to feed the town's curiosity further. As she left the store, she nearly collided with Eliza Thornton, the banker's daughter and widely considered the most eligible young woman in Wickenburg. "Sophia Blackett," Eliza said with a brittle smile. "Just the person I wanted to see." Sophia had never been close to Eliza, who moved in more affluent circles. "Hello, Eliza, how are you?" "Concerned, actually, about you." Eliza's voice dripped with false sweetness. "I understand Mr. Yates has asked you to the Harvest Dance." "He has," Sophia confirmed, already wary of where the conversation was heading. "How unexpected." Eliza adjusted her expensive hat. "You do realize he's one of the wealthiest newcomers to town. Father says his ranch purchase was paid in full in cash." "Thomas's finances are none of my concern," Sophia said coolly. Eliza laughed. "Aren't they, though? A man like that could have his pick of any woman in the territory. One has to wonder why he'd choose someone so ordinary." The barb stung, but Sophia refused to show it. "Perhaps you should ask him yourself if you're so curious." "Oh, I intend to," Eliza replied. "At the dance. Father has business with Mr. Yates and will certainly be speaking with him at length." With a final smug smile, she swept past Sophia and into the store. Sophia stood on the boardwalk for a moment, Eliza's words echoing in her mind. Was she right? Was it strange that Thomas had chosen her over someone like Eliza Thornton, with her family connections and dowry? By the time she reached home, doubt had firmly taken root. When she told her father about the encounter, Samuel scoffed. "Jealousy, pure and simple," he declared. "The Thornton girl's been the belle of Wickenburg for years. She's not used to being overlooked." "But what if she's right, Papa? What if Thomas is just, I don't know, being kind again?" Samuel set down his carpentry tools. He'd begun working on small projects as his strength returned and faced his daughter. "Sophie, listen to me. A man doesn't invite a woman to the Harvest Dance out of kindness, and he doesn't look at a woman the way Yates looks at you unless his heart's engaged." He squeezed her shoulder gently. "You're every bit as worthy of happiness as Eliza Thornton, maybe more so. Don't let her poison what could be a good thing." Sophia nodded, though the seed of doubt remained. It grew larger on Friday when she arrived at the ranch to find Thomas deep in conversation with Mr. Thornton and Eliza on the front porch. Eliza was wearing a stunning blue dress that highlighted her blonde hair and fair complexion, and she was laughing at something Thomas had said. Not wanting to interrupt, Sophia headed toward the kitchen door at the back of the house. Before she could reach it, however, Thomas called her name. "Sophia, there you are." He excused himself from the Thorntons and crossed the yard to meet her. "I was beginning to worry you weren't coming today." "I'm a little late," she admitted. "Papa needed help with an order this morning." Thomas glanced back at the porch where the Thorntons waited. "I have to finish this business meeting, but it shouldn't take long. Would you mind waiting?" "Of course not. I have plenty to do inside." He smiled gratefully and squeezed her hand. "Thank you, and Sophia, we're still on for tomorrow night, right? The dance." The earnestness in his question dispelled some of her doubts. "Yes, we are." "Good." His smile widened. "Very good." As she slipped into the house, Sophia caught Eliza's cool, assessing gaze following her. The banker's daughter clearly saw her as competition, which was both intimidating and oddly reassuring. If Eliza felt threatened, perhaps Thomas's interest was genuine after all. True to his word, Thomas concluded his meeting quickly. When Sophia heard the front door close behind the Thorntons, she emerged from the kitchen to find him standing in the hallway, looking troubled. "Is everything all right?" she asked. He shook his head slightly, as if clearing it. "Just business complications. Thornton's bank is handling the accounts for Hollister's mining consortium. He was trying to persuade me to reconsider selling that southern section." "And will you?" "No." The firmness in his voice left no room for doubt. "Though they're making it increasingly difficult to refuse." He sighed, then visibly brightened. "But enough about that. Tell me about your morning. How's your father doing?" They fell into easy conversation as Sophia continued her work around the house. Thomas stayed close, helping move furniture and reaching high shelves, seemingly reluctant to be separated from her, even for routine ranch tasks. As the afternoon waned, Thomas surprised her by asking if she'd walk with him to the creek that ran along the eastern edge of the property. "It's my favorite spot on the ranch," he explained. "I'd like to show it to you before you head back to town." The creek burbled merrily over smooth stones, shaded by cottonwood trees whose leaves had just begun to turn golden with the approach of autumn. Thomas led her to a natural sitting area formed by a fallen log beside the water. "I come here to think sometimes," he said as they sat side by side. "It reminds me of a place my mother used to take me and my brother when we were boys." "It's beautiful," Sophia agreed, trailing her fingers in the cool water. Thomas watched her, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then, with a deep breath, he turned to face her fully. "Sophia, I need to tell you something, and I'd appreciate it if you'd hear me out completely before responding." Her heart began to pound. "All right. When I first came to Wickenburg, I had no intentions beyond establishing my ranch and making a quiet life for myself. Then I saw you in the mercantile, counting those coins." He smiled at the memory. "Something about your determination, your dignity even in difficult circumstances, it struck me, and every day since, I've discovered more to admire about you." He took her hand gently in his. "I know our acquaintance has been brief, and I know there are those in town who might think I should set my sights on someone like Eliza Thornton, but I've never been one to let others dictate my heart." Sophia could scarcely breathe. "What are you saying, Thomas?" "I'm saying that I'm falling in love with you, Sophia Blackett, and I very much hope that you might someday feel the same about me." The simple, heartfelt declaration swept away her remaining doubts. "Thomas," she whispered, "I already do." His eyes widened slightly, as if he hadn't dared hope for such a response. Then, with infinite gentleness, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a sweet, tender kiss that seemed to stop time itself. When they finally drew apart, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the day you walked onto my porch," he admitted. Sophia laughed softly. "And I've wanted you to." They remained by the creek until the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, talking of their pasts, their hopes, the future they might build together if things continued on this path. It was only when twilight began to deepen that Thomas reluctantly suggested they return to the house. "I should get you back to town before your father starts to worry," he said, helping her to her feet. The ride back to Wickenburg was filled with a new awareness, a delicious tension that made every accidental touch, every shared glance more meaningful. Thomas rode close beside her, occasionally reaching across to touch her hand or arm as if reassuring himself that she was real, that what had happened between them was real. At her door, he kissed her once more, a promise of things to come. "Until tomorrow night," he murmured. "I'll pick you up at 7 for the dance." Sophia floated into the house, her heart too full for words. Her father took one look at her face and smiled knowingly. "I see Yates finally found his courage," he remarked. Sophia could only nod, happiness bubbling up inside her like a spring. The harvest dance was the highlight of Wickenburg's social calendar, held in the town hall with decorations of autumn leaves, pumpkins, and corn stalks. A small orchestra had been brought in from Phoenix, and nearly everyone in town attended in their finest clothes. Sophia had spent the day preparing nervously, washing her hair and pressing her best dress, a deep blue gown with modest lace trim that had belonged to her mother. It was slightly old-fashioned but beautifully made, and when she put it on, Samuel's eyes grew misty. "You look just like her," he said softly. "She'd be so proud of the woman you've become, Sophie." At precisely 7 o'clock, a knock came at the door. Samuel opened it to reveal Thomas standing on the porch, more formally dressed than Sophia had ever seen him, in a dark suit, crisp white shirt, and string tie. He held a small bouquet of wildflowers. "Good evening, sir," he greeted Samuel, then his gaze moved to Sophia and he seemed momentarily lost for words. "Sophia, you look beautiful doesn't seem adequate," she blushed, accepting the flowers. "Thank you, you look very handsome yourself." Samuel watched their exchange with undisguised approval. "You two had best get going if you want to make the opening dance. And Thomas," he added as they turned to leave, "take good care of my girl." "I intend to, sir," Thomas replied, the simple words carrying the weight of a promise. The town hall was already crowded when they arrived, and a hush fell briefly as they entered together, confirming that their courtship was now public knowledge. Sophia felt the curious stares, heard the whispers, but with Thomas's hand firmly holding hers, she found she didn't care. "May I have this dance?" he asked formally as the orchestra began a waltz. "You may," she replied with a smile. Thomas led her onto the floor with unexpected grace, and as they moved together through the steps of the waltz, Sophia felt as though they were floating. His hand at her waist was warm and steady, his eyes never leaving hers. "Everyone's watching us," she murmured. "Let them watch," he replied. "I'm the envy of every man here tonight." The evening passed in a blur of dancing, laughter, and quiet conversations in the moments between songs. Thomas introduced her to ranchers from neighboring properties, treating her with such obvious respect and affection that even the most skeptical observers seemed won over. Even the Thorntons approached them, though Eliza's smile remained stiff. "Mr. Yates, Miss Blackett," Mr. Thornton greeted them. "Enjoying the festivities?" "Very much so," Thomas replied politely. "I understand congratulations might soon be in order," Thornton continued, his shrewd eyes assessing them. "The harvest dance has a reputation for inspiring commitments." Sophia felt herself flush at the implication, but Thomas merely smiled. "When I have news to share, Mr. Thornton, you'll be among the first to know." As the banker moved away with his disgruntled daughter, Thomas squeezed Sophia's hand reassuringly. "Don't mind them. Thornton's just fishing for information. He's still hoping I'll change my mind about the land sale." "And Eliza's still hoping you'll change your mind about me," Sophia added wryly, Thomas laughed. Never. As the evening drew to a close, the orchestra announced the final dance, a slow, romantic waltz. Thomas led Sophia onto the floor one last time, drawing her closer than propriety strictly allowed. "I've been thinking," he said softly as they moved to the music. "About what?" "The future." "Our future, if you're willing." His eyes searched hers. "I know it's soon, perhaps too soon, but I can't imagine my life without you in it, Sophia. The ranch, the house. None of it means anything without you there." Sophia's heart soared. "Thomas, are you not here?" he interrupted gently. "Not with the whole town watching, but soon." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Very soon." When the dance ended, Thomas escorted her home through the cool autumn night, both of them quiet, content to be in each other's company. At her door, he kissed her with a newfound passion that left her breathless. "Good night, Sophia," he whispered. "Thank you for the most wonderful evening of my life." "Good night," she replied, reluctant to let him go. "I'll see you Monday at the ranch." He nodded, then kissed her once more before disappearing into the darkness. Inside, Samuel was waiting up, eager to hear about the dance. Sophia shared the highlights, careful to keep her tone casual when mentioning Thomas's hints about their future. But her father wasn't fooled. "That boy's going to propose to you," he stated matter-of-factly. "Papa, we've known each other barely 2 months." Samuel shrugged. "Sometimes it doesn't take long to recognize what's right. Your mother and I courted for just 6 weeks before I asked her to marry me." Sophia smiled at the memory. "And she made you wait another 6 months before she said yes." "Smartest thing she ever did," Samuel chuckled. "Gave me time to build us a proper house." His expression grew serious. "But Yates already has his house. A fine one. All it needs now is a woman's touch on a permanent basis." "And you'd be all right with that. With me leaving," Samuel took her hand. "Sophie, all I've ever wanted is your happiness. If Thomas Yates makes you happy, and it's clear as day that he does, then you have my blessing, whenever and however things progress between you." Monday morning dawned with ominous clouds gathering over the mountains. Sophia rode to the ranch earlier than usual, hoping to finish her work before the threatening storm broke. As she approached, she was surprised to see several unfamiliar horses tied outside the main house. Thomas met her at the door, his expression tense. "Sophia, I'm glad you're here. We have a situation." Inside, seated around the dining table, were Mr. Thornton, Hollister, and 2 other men Sophia didn't recognize. Maps and papers were spread across the surface. "Miss Blackett," Hollister acknowledged her with a nod. "Perhaps you can talk some sense into your beau here. He's being unreasonably stubborn about a very generous offer." Thomas's jaw tightened. "As I've told you repeatedly, gentlemen, the land is not for sale. Not at any price." Thornton cleared his throat. "Mr. Yates, the mining consortium, is prepared to double their initial offer. That's 10 times what the land is worth for ranching purposes." "And I've told you, it's not about money," Thomas replied evenly. "That section contains the main water source for the entire property. Without it, the ranch isn't viable." One of the unknown men, expensively dressed, with cold eyes, spoke up. "Water rights can be negotiated. They can also be revoked," Thomas countered. "I'm familiar with how these arrangements typically play out, Mr. Lancaster, Edward Lancaster, major investor in the consortium." Thomas nodded. "Well, Mr. Lancaster, my answer remains no. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have ranch business to attend to." The men exchanged glances, and Sophia sensed a tension beyond ordinary business negotiations. "Very well," Lancaster said, gathering the papers. "But I strongly suggest you reconsider. Silver fever is sweeping the territory, Yates. Those who stand in its way tend to get trampled." The thinly veiled threat hung in the air as the men filed out. Thomas saw them to the door, his posture rigid with controlled anger. When they had gone, he returned to Sophia, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I apologize for that. They showed up unannounced. Are you all right?" she asked, concerned by the worry etched on his face. "I don't trust them," he admitted. "Especially Lancaster. He has a reputation for getting what he wants by any means necessary." "What will you do?" Thomas sighed. "Stand my ground. It's my land and I have no legal obligation to sell." He tried to smile. "Enough about them. How was the rest of your weekend?" They tried to settle into their usual routine, but Sophia could see that Thomas remained preoccupied. The threatening storm seemed to mirror the tension in the air, dark clouds building over the mountains as they worked. By early afternoon, the first fat raindrops began to fall, quickly intensifying into a downpour. Thunder rumbled overhead and lightning flashed across the darkened sky. "You shouldn't try to ride back to town in this," Thomas said, watching the storm from the porch. "It's not safe." Sophia knew he was right, but the prospect of staying overnight at the ranch unchaperoned made her uneasy. "Perhaps it will pass quickly," she suggested. As if in answer, the sky opened further, rain now falling in sheets that rendered visibility to mere feet. Thunder crashed directly overhead, making the windows rattle. "It's not letting up any time soon," Thomas observed. "You should stay until it passes, even if that means overnight. I can sleep in the bunkhouse with the hands. You can have the house to yourself." Sophia hesitated, then nodded. "All right. I should get word to Papa somehow, though. He'll worry. Miguel was heading into town for supplies before the storm hit. I'll ask him to stop by your father's house when he returns." Thomas touched her arm gently. "It will be fine, Sophia, I promise." As the afternoon wore into evening, the storm showed no signs of abating. If anything, it intensified, the wind howling around the eaves of the house and rain pounding against the windows. Thomas built a fire in the main fireplace to ward off the unusual chill brought by the storm. They prepared a simple supper together. Working side by side in the kitchen, Sophia had restored to gleaming order. There was something deeply intimate about the domestic scene, chopping vegetables, setting the table, moving around each other in the warm, lamp-lit space. "This is nice," Thomas remarked as they sat down to eat. "Having you here, I mean, makes the house feel like a home." Sophia smiled, feeling the same contentment. "It is nice." After supper, they settled in the parlor, the crackling fire casting a warm glow over the room. Thomas selected a book from the shelf, a volume of Tennyson's poetry, and asked if he might read aloud. Sophia agreed, enchanted by his deep voice giving life to the beautiful words. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but within the house, a different kind of electricity filled the air, the awareness of being alone together, of the growing feelings between them. When Thomas finished reading, he set the book aside and turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "Sophia, there's something I need to ask you, and I'd planned a more romantic setting, but—" He took a deep breath. "The truth is, I don't want to wait anymore." Her heart began to race as he slid from the sofa onto one knee before her, taking her hands in his. "Sophia Blackett, I love you. I think I've loved you since that first day in the mercantile. You've brought light and warmth into my life, and the thought of this house of my future without you in it is unbearable." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a perfect diamond. "Will you do me the greatest honor of becoming my wife?" Tears filled Sophia's eyes as she looked from the ring to Thomas's hopeful face. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly, "Yes, Thomas, I will marry you." Joy transformed his features as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to gather her into his arms. Their kiss was tender at first, then deepened with a passion that had been building between them for weeks. When they finally broke apart breathless, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. "I should go to the bunkhouse now," he murmured reluctantly, "before I forget myself entirely." Sophia nodded, though part of her wished he would stay. "When?" she asked softly. "When should we marry?" "As soon as you're ready," he replied. "Tomorrow or next year, whatever you want." She smiled, touching his face gently. "Not tomorrow, but not next year either. Perhaps a month. Time enough for a proper wedding, but not so long that it feels like torture to wait." Thomas laughed. "A month sounds perfect." He kissed her once more, then reluctantly pulled away. "Good night, my love. Sweet dreams." After he left, braving the storm to dash to the bunkhouse, Sophia stood in the quiet house, looking down at the ring sparkling on her finger. Mrs. Thomas Yates. The name felt right as the man himself. The storm passed during the night, and morning dawned clear and fresh, the desert air washed clean by the rain. Sophia woke early, her heart light with happiness as she remembered the events of the previous evening. The diamond caught the sunlight as she dressed, sending prisms of light dancing across the wall. She was preparing breakfast when Thomas appeared at the kitchen door, his hair still damp from washing, his smile as bright as the morning sun. "Good morning, future Mrs. Yates," he greeted her, crossing the room to kiss her soundly. "Good morning yourself," she replied, returning his kiss before turning back to the stove. "I hope you're hungry. I'm making enough for an army." "Starving," he admitted, pouring himself coffee. "I barely slept last night, too happy." They shared breakfast at the kitchen table, making plans for their future together. Thomas wanted to add a proper study to the house, and perhaps expand the garden. Sophia suggested converting one of the unused bedrooms into a sewing room, and the other bedrooms. Thomas asked with a meaningful smile, "I hope we'll have use for those too in time." Sophia blushed but smiled back. "I hope so too. I've always wanted children." "A whole houseful," Thomas agreed, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Boys with your courage, girls with your beauty." Their sweet planning was interrupted by the arrival of Miguel, looking troubled. "Boss, we got trouble at the south fence," he reported. "Looks like someone cut it during the night. Cattle are scattered halfway to town." Thomas frowned. "Deliberate sabotage," Miguel nodded grimly. "Looks that way. Wire was cut clean, not broken." Thomas stood, his jaw set. "I'll ride out with you. We need to round up those cattle before they wander too far." He turned to Sophia apologetically. "I'm sorry, love. This may take all day." "Go," she urged him. "I'll keep things in order here, then head back to town to tell Papa our news." He kissed her quickly. "I'll come to town this evening. We can announce our engagement properly." After Thomas left with Miguel, Sophia finished her morning chores, humming happily as she worked. By noon, the house was in order, and she prepared to ride back to Wickenburg, eager to share her happiness with her father. The journey to town was pleasant, the desert blooming with new life after the night's rain. Sophia let herself daydream about her future with Thomas, the ranch becoming truly their home, children playing in the yard, a lifetime of love and partnership stretching ahead. As she rode down Wickenburg's Main Street, however, she noticed an unusual level of activity around the bank. A crowd had gathered, and raised voices suggested some sort of disturbance. Curious, Sophia dismounted and tied her horse to a hitching post. "What's happening?" she asked Mrs. Wilson, the doctor's wife, who stood on the edge of the crowd. "It's the bank," the woman replied, eyes wide with excitement. "They say it's closing. Thornton's calling in all his loans effective immediately, something about the mining consortium withdrawing their business." Sophia felt a chill of foreboding. "Calling in loans, all of them, Mrs. Wilson nodded. "Everyone who owes money to the bank has to pay in full by the end of the week, or their property will be seized." The implications hit Sophia like a physical blow. Her father had a small loan against their house, taken out to cover expenses during his illness. It wasn't a large amount, but with no income for the past months, they had no way to pay it immediately. And Thomas, had he financed any part of his ranch purchase through Thornton's bank? He'd told the banker he'd paid cash, but what about operating expenses or improvements? Pushing through the crowd, Sophia made her way to the bank's entrance where Thornton himself stood reading an official notice. "Mr. Thornton," she called. "What's going on? Why are you calling in loans without warning?" The banker's eyes narrowed when he saw her. "Ah, Miss Blackett. Perhaps you should ask your fiancé. His refusal to cooperate with the mining consortium has had consequences." "What do you mean?" "Lancaster pulled all his investments from my bank this morning. Without that capital, I can't extend credit anymore." Thornton's voice hardened. "Actions have consequences, Miss Blackett. Yates chose to stand in the way of progress, and now the whole town will suffer for it." "But that's not fair. You can't blame Thomas for your bank's problems." "Fair?" Thornton laughed bitterly. "This isn't about fair, it's business. Lancaster made it very clear either Yates sells that land, or he'll ensure Wickenburg doesn't see a penny of mining money. Without that influx of cash, this town is finished." Sophia backed away, horrified by the malice in the banker's eyes. This wasn't just about business, it was personal now. Lancaster and Thornton were using the town to pressure Thomas into selling. She hurried to her father's house, finding him at his workbench, unaware of the drama unfolding in town. "Papa," she burst out, "something terrible is happening." She quickly explained the situation with the bank, watching Samuel's face grow grave as he understood the implications. "How much time do we have?" he asked. "Until the end of the week to pay the loan in full. Otherwise—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Samuel set down his tools. "Otherwise we lose the house," he sighed heavily. "And I suppose this has something to do with your young man refusing to sell his land." Sophia nodded miserably. "Thornton as much as said so. They're trying to force his hand by hurting the town." "Despicable tactics," Samuel muttered. "But not surprising from men like Lancaster. I've heard stories about his methods." Before they could discuss further, a knock came at the door. Sophia opened it to find Thomas standing on the porch, his expression grim. "You've heard?" he asked without preamble. "Yes, I was just telling Papa." Thomas stepped inside, removing his hat. "I came as soon as I heard what Thornton was doing. Sophia, I'm so sorry. This is my fault." "No," she said firmly. "It's Lancaster's fault and Thornton's for going along with it. You have every right to refuse to sell your land." Thomas ran a hand through his hair in agitation. "That may be, but the fact remains that people are suffering because of my decision." He turned to Samuel. "Sir, I understand you have a loan with Thornton's bank." Samuel nodded. "A small one taken out during my illness." "I want to pay it," Thomas said immediately, "and any other debts you have. It's the least I can do considering—" "No," Samuel interrupted, surprising both of them. "That's not the answer, son." "Papa," Sophia protested, "we could lose the house. And accepting charity would mean losing something more valuable, our self-respect." Samuel's voice was gentle but firm. "Thomas, I appreciate the offer, truly, but this isn't your burden to bear alone." Thomas looked between father and daughter, conflict clear on his face. "Then what do we do?" "I won't sell that land. Once the water rights are gone, the entire ranch becomes worthless." Samuel was quiet for a moment, thinking. There might be another way. The silver strike has brought new people to town, people who need furniture, cabinetry, all sorts of woodwork. If I can secure some commissions quickly. "That still won't be enough by the end of the week," Sophia pointed out. "No," Samuel agreed, "but it might buy us time if we can make a partial payment." Thomas paced the small room, clearly distressed. This isn't right. Lancaster is using innocent people as pawns in his game. Suddenly, he stopped, a new determination in his eyes. Maybe we can beat him at his own game. What do you mean? Sophia asked. Lancaster wants that land because he believes the silver vein runs through it. But what if it doesn't? A slow smile spread across Thomas's face. What if there's something even more valuable there instead? Samuel leaned forward, intrigued. Go on. I need to send some telegrams, Thomas said. And then I need to have a very public conversation in the saloon tonight. He turned to Sophia, taking her hands in his. Do you trust me? With my heart and my life, she replied without hesitation. Good, because I'm about to start a rumor that might just save this town and our future. That evening, the Dusty Diamond Saloon was more crowded than usual, filled with worried townspeople discussing the bank's sudden action. Thomas arrived deliberately late, making sure his entrance was noticed. He ordered a whiskey at the bar, then raised his voice just enough to be overheard. Shame about the bank, he remarked to the bartender. Though I suppose Thornton's doing Lancaster a favor, helping him pressure me to sell. Several nearby conversations paused as people strained to listen. Not that it matters, Thomas continued, louder still. Lancaster's backing the wrong horse anyway. That silver vein doesn't run through my property at all. Now the saloon had gone nearly silent, all attention focused on Thomas. What do you mean, Yates? Called one of the miners. Hollister's surveys showed what the consortium wanted them to show, Thomas interrupted. But I had my own survey done last week. The real value on my land isn't silver. He paused dramatically. It's copper. A massive deposit, probably the biggest in the territory. A ripple of excitement ran through the crowd. Copper wasn't as glamorous as silver, but it was increasingly valuable for the growing electrical and telephone industries. If that's true, the miner pressed, why haven't you started mining it yourself? Thomas shrugged. Ranching's my business, not mining. But I've been in talks with the Western Copper Company out of Denver. Their representative arrives tomorrow to discuss terms. He drained his whiskey. Should be interesting to see Lancaster's face when he realizes what he's been missing while chasing silver. By the time Thomas left the saloon, the story had taken on a life of its own. He hurried to the Blackett house, where Sophia and Samuel were waiting anxiously. Did it work? Sophia asked as soon as he walked through the door. Like a charm, Thomas confirmed. Half the town believes there's a copper fortune on my land and the other half will by morning. And is there? Samuel asked shrewdly. Thomas grinned. Not that I know of, but Lancaster doesn't know that either. All I need is enough time for my plan to work. He took Sophia's hands. Do you still want to marry me, knowing I'm starting rumors and playing games with men like Lancaster? More than ever, she replied firmly. You're doing what you must to protect what's yours and to help the town. The next morning, as promised, a well-dressed stranger arrived on the stagecoach and checked into the hotel, asking loudly for directions to the Yates ranch. By noon, word had spread that he was indeed a representative of the Western Copper Company. In reality, he was Thomas's brother, William, summoned by urgent telegram from Texas. But only Thomas, Sophia, and Samuel knew the truth. The rumor had its intended effect. By midday, Lancaster himself appeared at Thomas's ranch, his manner considerably less threatening than before. Yates, he greeted Thomas, who was deliberately working on the corral fence within view of the house where Sophia was watching. I understand congratulations are in order for your engagement and your discovery. Thomas nodded coolly. Lancaster, what can I do for you? I think perhaps we got off on the wrong foot. Lancaster attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The mining consortium would still be interested in purchasing your land at a significantly improved price, of course. I'm sure they would, Thomas replied. But as I told you before, the land isn't for sale. Lancaster's facade of friendliness slipped. Don't play games, Yates. We both know there's no copper on this land. Our surveys were thorough. Thomas hammered a nail into the fence post with deliberate force. Do we know that? Seems to me your surveyors were focused on finding silver, not copper. Easy to miss what you're not looking for. The Western Copper Company representative is meeting with me this afternoon to discuss terms, Thomas interrupted. So unless you have something new to offer. Lancaster's face darkened with anger. This isn't over, Yates. Actually, it is, Thomas countered. And you can tell Thornton to rescind his loan recall. Otherwise, I'll make sure everyone knows it was a deliberate attempt to manipulate property values for your benefit. The territorial governor might be interested in that kind of banking practice. After Lancaster stormed off, Sophia hurried out to join Thomas. Do you think it worked? We'll find out soon enough, he replied, putting an arm around her shoulders. But Lancaster's not a man who likes to lose. If he thinks there's even a chance of copper on my land, he'll back off the pressure tactics to avoid driving up the price further. Their theory proved correct. By the following day, Thornton had posted a new notice extending the loan payment deadlines by 3 months in recognition of the town's potential for growth. The immediate crisis was averted. William Yates stayed in Wickenburg for a week, playing his part as the copper company representative to perfection. When he finally prepared to return to Texas, he took Thomas aside for a private word. "You've done well here, brother," he said, gesturing around the ranch. "And your Sophia is a treasure. Mother would have loved her." "She would have," Thomas agreed. "I wish she could have been here to see all of it." William clasped his shoulder. "She is, in a way, this land, this life you're building. It's what she always wanted for us. To find our own paths, our own happiness." The brothers embraced, and Thomas watched with a touch of sadness as William rode away toward town in the waiting stagecoach. But the melancholy was short-lived, for Sophia soon joined him on the porch, slipping her arm through his. "Penny for your thoughts," she said softly. Thomas smiled down at her. "I was just thinking about family, the one I've lost and the one I'm gaining." He touched her cheek gently. "William approves of you, by the way, not that I needed his approval." "I'm glad all the same," Sophia replied. "I liked him very much." They stood together, looking out over their ranch as the setting sun bathed everything in golden light. "1 month until our wedding," Thomas murmured, pulling her closer. "Seems like an eternity." Sophia laughed. "It will pass quickly enough. There's much to do, my dress to finish, arrangements to make." "And your father? How is he adjusting to the idea of you leaving home?" "Better than I expected," Sophia admitted. "Especially since you suggested he might want to build his workshop here on the ranch. Having a project has energized him." Indeed, Samuel had begun drawing up plans for a carpentry workshop to be built near the barn, where he could continue his trade without the strain of managing alone in town. It was a perfect solution, allowing him independence while keeping him close to his daughter and future son-in-law. The month leading up to the wedding passed in a flurry of activity. Word of the copper discovery had brought new business to Wickenburg, as speculators and opportunists flocked to the area. Samuel received more commissions for furniture than he could handle alone, and Thomas helped him hire an assistant. Lancaster and his consortium eventually withdrew from the area, focusing their efforts on the confirmed silver deposits elsewhere. Thornton's bank stabilized, though the banker himself remained cool toward Thomas and Sophia. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, the October air crisp but not cold. Sophia prepared in Mrs. Winter's house, surrounded by the older woman's daughters who had traveled from Phoenix for the occasion, her dress, a creation of ivory satin with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, had been her mother's, carefully altered by Sophia's own skilled hands. Her hair was arranged in an elegant knot, adorned with small white flowers from the ranch garden. "You look like an angel," Samuel declared when he came to escort her to the church. His eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Your mother would be so proud." The small church was filled to capacity with townspeople and ranchers from the surrounding area. As Sophia walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her eyes found Thomas waiting at the altar, handsome in his new suit, his face alight with love and pride. The ceremony was simple but deeply moving, both bride and groom speaking their vows with clear voices and full hearts. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Thomas kissed his bride with a tenderness that brought sighs from the women in the congregation. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, the house and yard transformed with lanterns, flowers, and tables laden with food. Mrs. Garcia had outdone herself, preparing a feast that would be talked about for months to come. As evening fell, Thomas led his bride in their first dance as husband and wife, the gathered guests forming a circle around them in the yard. "Happy Mrs. Yates," he murmured as they moved to the music. "Completely," Sophia replied, her heart so full it seemed it might burst. "And you?" "I never knew it was possible to be this happy," Thomas confessed, "or to love someone as much as I love you." Later, after the guests had departed and Samuel had retired to the newly prepared guest room, Thomas carried Sophia across the threshold of their bedroom, now truly theirs, and set her gently on her feet. "Welcome home, my love," he whispered, gathering her in his arms for a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. In the years that followed, the Yates ranch prospered. The copper deposit rumor eventually faded, but by then, Thomas's reputation as a skilled rancher and breeder of quality horses had been established. The ranch expanded, as did the family, first with the arrival of twin boys, Samuel and William, followed 2 years later by a daughter, Elizabeth. Samuel Blackett's workshop became known throughout the territory for fine craftsmanship, and he found new joy in teaching his grandsons the skills he had once feared would die with him. Sophia and Thomas's love deepened with each passing season, weathering the inevitable challenges of ranch life with the same strength and determination that had brought them together. Each night, as they lay in each other's arms, they marveled at the twist of fate that had led them to that moment in the mercantile, when she was counting coins that weren't enough, and he had added his own to the pile, changing both their lives forever. And on quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the desert sky blazed with stars, they would sit together on the porch of their home, hands intertwined, hearts beating as one, grateful for the love that had begun with a simple act of kindness and grown into a lifetime of joy.